Joining us now, Michael Reagan, political commentator and chair of the Reagan Legacy Foundation. And you can find him on Twitter. His address there is @ReaganWorld. Michael, thanks for joining us by telephone from California this morning. What do you make of the president's statement?
Well, you know, it's interesting. He picks and chooses what he wants to get involved in, and every issue he seems to get involved in is a race issue. And that's it. I mean, that's where it is. He doesn't talk about what's going on in Chicago. He doesn't talk about what's going on really in other parts of this country, which is a real problem. Instead, he finds a race issue in every single issue, and that's what's sad about this president of the United States. There's a lot of issues on the table in the world that we live in, jobs and everything else, but I think he wants his legacy to be that he's trying to do everything he can about race, but maybe he needs to do things about crime.
Michael, in your most recent column, you write, and I quote, "If you don't want to get shot dead by a cop, don't rob a convenience store, don't try to grab a cop's gun, and don't charge the cop after he orders you to stop." Obviously, that's in reference to the Ferguson case. We just had Bernie Carrick on talking about the case with Mr. Garner in New York, Eric Garner resisting arrest. How do you believe the two cases differ, or is there a basic component at work here that brought about these police actions?
Well, I think one of the differences in New York is that the chokehold is not something that, in fact, is one of the programs or one of the holds used by New York police. In fact, they asked you not to use the chokehold. That, indeed, is a problem for the police officer. The other issue is that you have somebody who was, yes, resisting arrest, but also told you, 11 times you couldn't breathe. So I think in a lot of ways it is a different issue. Resisting arrest, you resist arrest. But if you can't breathe, you're saying you can't breathe, and the police officer is using a chokehold, which is not against the law, but against policy in New York, then you have a lot of different issues than what you had going on in Ferguson. The other issue is we haven't heard what was testified before the grand jury in New York. We know what the testimony was, in fact, in Ferguson, Missouri. And as I said in my op-ed piece, the fact is that I think that the DA there was brilliant, because when he saw the evidence where it was going, he knew he couldn't get many of those who would testify to a courtroom where they would be seen, their names would be put out there by the community, and he feared for their safety and their lives, and he could get them behind closed doors in a secretive grand jury where they could testify honestly and truthfully, as many of the blacks did.
Michael, we got about a minute 15 left. I want to get your comment on something that Peter King had to say. Congressman Peter King, let's take a listen, then we'll get your reaction on the backside.
I feel strongly the police officer should not have been indicted. I've been following this case from the start. You had a 350-pound person who was resisting arrest. The police were trying to bring him down as quickly as possible. If he had not had asthma and a heart condition and was so obese, almost definitely he would not have died from this. The police had no reason to know that he was in serious condition.
Simple question, 30 seconds. Do you agree with what Peter King is saying there?
Well, again, Peter King is from New York. He's congressman from New York, probably a lot more familiar with it. And like I was saying before, the fact is saying he couldn't breathe 11 times using a chokehold that is outlawed within the police department causes a problem for the policeman. But again, I have not heard the testimony before the grand jury as we've heard the testimony before the grand jury in Ferguson, Missouri. So to sit there again and make this a race issue, this isn't a race issue. If it was a white guy with an asthma problem or a Spanish guy with an asthma problem, the same person would have died.
Fair enough. Michael Reagan, stay with us. You do too. We're coming right back. Let's continue our conversation with political commentator Michael Reagan, chair of the Reagan Legacy Foundation. Michael can be found and followed on Twitter. His handle @ReaganWorld. Michael, in your world, what about the notion of these cameras on police officers? Is that a good idea?
It's not going to change anything. I mean, look at the narrative coming out of Ferguson. I mean, there's no corroboration to the fact that hands up, don't shoot, but yet that's the narrative. So the race baiters are always going to find an issue because there's money in it. There's money in being a race baiter. There's money for Al Sharpton. There's money for Louis Farrakhan. There's money for Jesse Jackson. They don't want to solve the problem, and not at all. And so you go with body cams out there. Why put body cams on every member of Congress? I tweeted at one point at Reagan World that, with members of Congress, all of them should be made to pee in a bottle before and after every vote to make sure that they're drug-free. I mean, the reaction was so positive from across the country on my Twitter account, because they make us do it at the office blindly if we're working for UPS or some operation. And this isn't going to solve the problem. In America, as long as you have race baiters out there who make a big living by baiting everybody to make it a race issue. There was a kid out here in Los Angeles about a year ago who was beaten to death by police officers. He was homeless, a white homeless guy. The homeless people didn't burn the city down. And what have you. Do we have a homeless problem? Should we talk about homelessness in America because they're beating homeless people on the streets of Los Angeles? Like I said before we went to the break, the man back in Staten Island, it didn't matter if he was black, white, brown, pink, purple, or whatever. He still would have died given the same circumstances that in that case. But they want to turn everything into a race issue. My suggestion is quit doing illegal things. Live according to the law. And when a police officer says something, you might want to do it.
Speaking of things illegal, let's talk illegal immigration. Senator Ted Cruz has called on the GOP to utilize the power of the purse that Congress can exercise over President Obama and his executive action on amnesty. He says the Republicans should not allocate tax dollars at all to fund this. What is your take on what's going on in Washington?
Well, there's a lot of issues in there. I think in many ways, Ted Cruz is absolutely right on this. But the other side of the coin is this is really a state issue. And I wrote about this about 3 weeks ago in my column you find at Newsmax and across the country, that this is really a state issue. They're the ones that are going to have to pay the price. And you and I talked about it on Newsmax TV. And now you have 17 states as of yesterday who have joined in the lawsuit against the federal government because they're the ones that are going to be paying the bill. The Congress of the United States needs to go out there and pass the laws that were sitting at Harry Reid's desk. Get them done. At the same time, write an immigration bill and send that to the President of the United States and get it off your foot and put it on the President's foot. Watch him veto it, and he becomes the problem instead of, well, he is a problem, but even a bigger problem the country's able to see. You need to do the business that you were elected to do. And jobs.
And Michael, mindful of your advice, 30 seconds left, should that bill be an enforcement-only bill on immigration?
The bill has to be a border bill. We have to take care of the border of the United States of America. That's what we need to do. We need to do that first. And then you deal with the other issues involved. But you've got to find an area where even the Republican Party can agree things that need to be done, things that can be done. Ronald Reagan were president, he'd pull them all into the Oval Office, pull the legislation out, look at it, say, where are the areas we agree, write that, send it to me, and I'll sign it.
Fair enough. Michael Reagan is handled on Twitter at Reagan World. Michael, thanks again, and America's Forum will be right back.